Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Talk, an introduction to the Microsoft Business Process Catalog in Mavim. My name is Bandy Toves, and I'll be your moderator today. I'd like to start by introducing our presenters. First, we have Rachel Proffitt, Principal Program Manager at Microsoft. We also have Leo Solomons, a Value Engineer at Mavim. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Rachel to begin our presentation.
Thank you, Mandy, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to kick off our new series of Tech Talks all about the Microsoft Business Process Catalog, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you and introduce everybody to the Microsoft Business Process Catalog in Mavim. For those of you that don't know me, again, I like to do detailed introductions. My name is Rachel Proffitt. You can see all of my contact information here on the slide. I do invite you to connect with me if we're not already connected. The QR code that you can see on the screen will take you directly to my LinkedIn, but you can also find me on Twitter, YouTube, or at my blog at dynamics365lady.com. Also joining me today, I have Leo. Leo, do you want to go ahead and come on and do a quick introduction of yourself?
Certainly, Rachel. Hello, everybody. My name is Leo Solomons. I head the value engineering team for the Mavim Americas organization, and in that role, I collaborate closely with our partners, including Microsoft, in defining what we're going to talk about today, the business process catalog. And I assist the end customers as well with its adoption, and very happy to be here today and looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Leo. So taking a quick look at our agenda, today's session is going to be an introduction, so we're not going to deep dive into a lot of the nitty-gritty details, but we have a lot of Tech Talks planned in our series. We hope that you'll follow along with us in the coming weeks. But in today's session, we're going to be starting out by setting the groundwork for what exactly is the Microsoft Business Process Catalog and why it exists, why we created it. We'll also talk through in a little bit of detail how those business processes are structured and organized across the different levels, as well as all of our complementary, we call them trees, in the catalog data that we provide that supports those business processes. I'll also be handing it over to Leo, who will be doing a live demonstration of the Microsoft Business Process Catalog in the Mavim tool today. We do invite you to ask questions throughout the session using that Q&A panel. We'll try to get those questions answered as they come in, but we will also have dedicated time at the end for Q&A as well. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in and talk a little bit more in detail about what the Microsoft Business Process Catalog is and why it exists. We've spent a lot of time talking about AI and agents in lots of presentations. If you're kind of in the know with any Microsoft presentations lately, everything's all about AI and agents. And I wanted to kind of start by setting the kind of ground reason, or three reasons actually, why business process focused approach is so critical in this current age of AI. And the one thing that I say all the time, and I believe firmly is very true, is that you cannot automate what you don't understand. A process-focused approach isn't about slowing things down. It's about making sure that we're solving the right problems in the correct sequence with the right structure. And if you automate a poorly understood process, you just get faster confusion. And automating poorly designed processes oftentimes simply amplifies the inefficiency. And that's why this foundation matters so much in this age of AI. So I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about how to use a process-focused approach to help you reimagine and like what the catalog actually is and why it matters. So the Microsoft Business Process Catalog is Microsoft's official structured library of end-to-end business processes that are designed specifically for Dynamics 365 implementations. But one key thing I want to say here is that it's not just for Dynamics 365. It can be used for any technology implementations, and all of the Microsoft technologies are covered in our catalog. It's not a feature list. Rather, it's a process-first foundation that reflects how a real business operates and breaks that down into a consistent hierarchy that you can use in your delivery of a new Dynamics 365 implementation. For many of you as solution architects, this matters because it gives you a common language between business stakeholders and the technical teams. It also gives you a strong starting point for scoping, having fit to standard conversations, and the architectural decision-making process. More importantly, the catalog is designed to be a long-term asset, not just an implementation artifact. It helps customers move from understanding their processes to executing them consistently, and over time, post-go live, having that ability to monitor and then optimize them once they're already live on the solution. And that is what shifts delivery from task-based execution to process-driven outcomes and sets the foundation for everything that comes next. So I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the Business Process Excellence Framework. Many of you have probably seen this slide or another version of this slide, but our Business Process Catalog is this list of business processes that break down into 15 industry standard end-to-end processes that are further broken down into 92 areas. We continually enhance this catalog with quarterly releases, and we just released our March release earlier this week. So if you haven't downloaded it, we encourage you to do so. And the March release of our catalog includes more than 3,400 Microsoft-specific scenarios that further describe how those 600 plus business processes can be executed using Microsoft technologies. And each of those 3,400 scenarios maps to more than 7,000 deliverables, which are the artifacts and the things that must be executed by project teams to actually implement and start using Dynamics 365. If you were a part of Convergence back in December, you may have already heard about our strategic collaboration with Mavim, but we announced in December that Mavim is our tool of choice to create and publish our own Dynamics 365 business process flows. And this framework has always been extensible for ISVs and partners, but we're encouraging customers and partners to look to using a tool like Mavim to help them manage that. And it's the tool that we have chosen to manage our own business processes internally. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Leo, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the key features of the Mavim platform before we dive into some specific examples of the business process catalog and the various levels. Leo, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Yes, so briefly about Mavim, and we'll see some of it in a minute as well in the demo. But in terms of what it is, we like to term it the intelligent transformation platform. It really is that platform which you can capture all of the details of an operating model of an organization. And as such, that allows you to then anticipate change and respond to change in a more efficient way. And it does this through a number of features. First and foremost, Mavim is designed to be the single source of truth, combining all the different aspects, like I mentioned, of an operating model, be it the business processes, but perhaps the organizational structure, the roles, as we will see in some of the examples during the demo, the application landscape, and tying these elements together to become that single source of truth that is referenceable through all the other aspects of, for instance, a digital transformation or an implementation project. Another aspect is the fact that this tool itself is built on Microsoft technology. We leverage a lot of the Microsoft technology, among others, the Office suite, which in certain aspects are embedded in our platform. And that brings with it that level of familiarity and thus quick adoption and use as well for our end customers. Rachel mentioned this as well a moment ago. Mavim has been selected by Microsoft as the tool with which to maintain the business process catalog going forward. And as such, the catalog is delivered with Mavim as well. So it comes preloaded with the Mavim platform and allows for that acceleration of implementation and understanding of its structure and its usability. I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but obviously you will see this in the demo as well. It is a cloud-based application, the platform, and that allows for very easy deployment. We can stand up an environment in business hours and have a team fully equipped and ready to go. And that accelerates the adoption of it as well through that easy deployment. We pride ourselves in mentioning that it is an open platform. We've developed this extensive API layer that allows the information that is housed in Mavim to be exchanged. It can both ingest as well as function as the source for other systems, and as such is quite an open platform that allows for that interaction and interfacing with other project tooling. The platform itself is comprised of a number of modules, and these generally tend to be specialized for different roles within the organization or within particular projects or transformations, from the most simple read-only type roles that are essentially information consumers in the organization, through modules and interfaces that allow for more data capture and allow for reviewing and approval cycles and workflows, all the way to a full configuration suite that allows for the actual definition and updating of the entire framework that sits behind these information models, like the business process catalog. And so very much tailored to the different roles within the organization and the different roles of users. In addition, we have capabilities around the extensive analysis of processes as well, especially in the realm of process mining, which is once enterprise applications are in production, we have the ability to, through mining of the transactional data, understanding what the actual usage trends are, where bottlenecks sit within these processes, and that allows for then further continuous improvement and optimization of these processes as well through that particular module within our platform. And last but not least, like everybody else, we're investing heavily in AI as well. And as I mentioned, exposing the repository itself through layers that allow for conversational AI, for instance, to be one of the services that we offered, all the way through agents and even developments more on our roadmap, like MCP servers that allow for the integration of artificial intelligence as well, and Mavim functioning in such a ecosystem. Okay, and so with that, we see different use cases essentially for Mavim as a platform, and especially in the context of success by design, which is the Microsoft's framework that serves as a guideline for an implementation of the Dynamics 365 platform. Even within that and in similar implementation methodologies, we see different areas of use for the platform based on those capabilities that I spoke of earlier. And starting from the strategize phase, where the emphasis is understanding the scope, understanding the lay of the land. What are the actual business processes? Creating that shared understanding of what the processes are, how they look, but also which ones are actually within scope, and more importantly, how those processes that are targeted actually contribute to the actual benefits case and the benefits drivers and objectives of the organization. That's one clear use case, but also and during the initiate phase as well, where the emphasis sort of migrates more towards that designing. So Mavim is in that scenario used oftentimes doing, let's say, the discovery workshops, the capturing and, for instance, the designing of that particular future state, the analysis of processes that yield the actual adjustments where the standard is not there and there's a level of configuration or customization required. Mavim is the tool that helps that part of the collaboration and the actual definition and design of that future state. And during implementation, we see that very information then being condensed, collated, and curated, and being shared across the different teams. Those two first phases oftentimes pertain more to the business side of the organization, but the true strength of Mavim is, as I mentioned, the ability to function as that central source of information and thus coupling the business-related information, those processes and the adaptations of the processes to the actual work elements that are part of the actual configuration and development lifecycle itself, all the way to the coupling of those two, for instance, Azure DevOps and the work items contained therein. As well as in the following stage, which is the prepare. We oftentimes see Mavim being utilized oftentimes in the, let's say, the training realm, the organizational change management, the preparation of the organization, ensuring that adoption of those new processes that have been configured in the application is maximized, and ensuring the adoption, providing the actual linkage to the theory of it, right? The future state process designs to the actual application itself, to the screens, where you can see those processes in action. And the integrating, like I mentioned, to other agents and applications as well, Copilot, that allow for the querying and extraction and utilization of that information. And ultimately, during the operate phase, we see Mavim through those capabilities that I spoke of, amongst others, the process mining component and other analytic capabilities. We see the platform significantly contributing in the continuous improvement or operational excellence, if you will, where these processes are continuously evaluated and assessed for optimization. And then in general, as it pertains to that combination of Mavim and the catalog itself with Microsoft, how that contributes perhaps more from a commercial perspective during the different phases of that life cycle, right? So starting with the pre-sales, the key thing is, because of that central repository function, is that ability to bring together the different views, right? The alignment of business in IT and understanding the common objective and how that breaks down into those two components. By making those processes very explicit, very visible, very detailed in the breaking down of it and the coupling to the technology that supports it. During post-sale, and we spoke a little bit about that as well, is the fact that through that, the combination of Mavim with the business process catalog, and especially in the context of AI, it helps it function as that backbone, right? That source for a Dynamics configuration where all of the actual configuration work captured in the catalog and the deliverables associated with that are related back to the processes, and that is fully queryable and can be utilized throughout the organization as well. And that this is one feature that is very important. It's that creation of that shared language, as I spoke of earlier, but also the clarification, if you will, in terms of what can be standard and what can be the exception, right? Justification for that customization that you oftentimes see in organization, and the tracking of that as well as the implementation progresses. And then in the more post-go live situation, it's the acceleration of adoption, right? Whether it be through the information housed in the application itself or through its exposure through AI agents or the embedding of these agents as active actors in transactioning that basically utilize the data in Mavim. We see that as well as clearly one of the areas of development And lastly, that continuous improvement as well that I spoke of earlier as well, by reshaping the business processes, right? Having that ability because of the process mining capabilities in combination with all of the rich information housed within the transactional application in combination with the definition in Mavim. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to Rachel.
Awesome. Thanks, Leo. So I want to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to dive into a little bit more detail about like how the business processes are actually structured and organized across the various levels in the catalog. If you're familiar with our catalog, it's been available for several years. Hopefully many or most of you are. In older versions prior to the December 2026 release, we just had 4 levels to the hierarchy: levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, end-to-end business processes, areas, business processes, and scenarios. Starting in the December release and with the March release that just came out this week, we added 2 additional levels to this hierarchy. So the first 4 levels of the business process catalog still exist. We do have a link to a Learn article at the bottom of the page here that you can see, where we go into a lot more detail than we're going to go into on today's call about each of these catalog levels, including their naming standards, how to create one, do's and don'ts, best practices, and so on. But I want to spend a few minutes talking a little bit more about this before I go into a specific example. Levels 1, 2, and 3 of our catalog, we like to refer to them as being system agnostic. You might have actually heard me say earlier that like the business process catalog is not just for Dynamics, it's for any technology. Any business. We believe that you can leverage levels 1, 2, and 3 of our catalog across any organization as a good starting point to define the various processes that your organization does. Levels 4, 5, and 6 of the catalog, however, are where we start to become product specific. And this is where you'll find scenarios that further define a particular business process and the product or products, in many cases, that can be used to support that particular business process. And so these scenarios are like create sales orders in Dynamics 365 Commerce or Supply Chain or Dynamics 365 Sales, just as an example. Those system processes and test cases are new, and this is where we start to break down even further into a more granular level inside of the software. And when you get to the test case level, that's where we're actually describing exactly where to click and how to execute a particular process. So I've got a few examples, and one of the most common questions that we get about the Microsoft Business Process Catalog is if it is designed for, ERP or CE, and so on. This example here obviously demonstrates an example that is a field service-based example. This particular process, service to deliver, is primarily focused around field service, but you'll actually notice on the screen that we actually have 2 examples, one process that's actually a supply chain management process, and one that is a field service process. So, in the example, right, we take service to deliver, which is the end-to-end, and we break that further down into process areas like plan service work and deliver services. And then the example business process underneath deliver service here is perform service tasks. That breaks down further into performing that inside of Dynamics 365 field service. Like if you look at the actual catalog data, we also have another row that's similar, like because you can use the mobile app to do it. The system process is then executing the service work order, and then the test case would be verifying that work order status updates correctly. For example, going from in progress to completed. So this is just one example. Obviously, there are many, many rows in the catalog. We've got another example that's a supply chain management example. This is more of an ERP type example related to source to pay. So the source to pay process is that purchasing or procurement process in an organization. You will find other products other than supply chain management in this particular end-to-end. You'll even find Business Central, scenarios in this kind of branch of the catalog. And the example here is like we're managing supplier relationships and procuring goods and services. And we break that further down on the left side, the supplier relationships into discovering suppliers. And then the scenario is analyzing supplier risk directly in supply chain management. An example of a system process here is accessing the supply risk assessment workspace. And then the test case is to actually open that workspace. On the procurement side, right, with the purchase requisitions, right, we're adding lines to the purchase requisition. And the test cases would be things like adding category lines or adding product lines. Or it could be like punching out from an external supplier website. So these are just a few examples to demonstrate in a less abstract way how the catalog levels are structured. So I want to talk now a little bit about the other complementary trees. So the business process catalog is actually one of the trees, and I'll talk about it in these complementary trees. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about all the other data and information that we publish in our catalog that's related to the business processes. Business processes are kind of like our starting point where we ground things. But these 4 trees kind of make up the entirety of the business process catalog, although everything in the catalog is not necessarily a business process. The first tree that we like to talk about is the objectives tree. The objectives tree is a place where I can almost think of it like a set of folders that we create for you, where you can define your project's goals and what the project aims to achieve. If you've ever read our implementation guide and our success by design guidance, one of the things that we teach is that you should start with your goals and objectives and use a process-focused approach. So that first tree that I like to talk about is objectives. This is where you're kind of defining the why, like what are the goals of this project? And then the business processes is that tree that we've primarily been talking about up to this point. And this is where we have the details in that discussion of the key business processes that are involved in not just in a project, but in an organization overall. Deliverables are the list of expected outputs and products from the project. So when you're implementing a new technology solution, we have all these deliverables, and these deliverables are things like configurations, like parameters, number sequences, the different setup screens that you have to do across the application. And these deliverables are critical, and they map to the business processes and the objectives, right? And create this interwoven fabric, if you will, that creates the work that needs to be done. And the fourth and final tree is the delivery plan. And this is the outline of like when, who, and how all of those deliverables and business processes and objectives are going to be met. So the deliverables are the specific things that we're going to do, and the delivery plan is more like how are we going to execute and make all of those things happen. We do provide a default success by design delivery plan, and I'll talk more about this in a few slides, but this is one of those touch points where there's a lot of opportunity to extend and modify and customize the catalog as a partner to make it fit your methodology. So this slide here I like because it gives us a nice big visualization of like what are all these different levels and these different trees and branches and so on. The objectives tree in Mavim contains more than 200 topics, and they're organized into 2 levels, the functional areas, and then we call them the tollgate, sprint, and project folders. So all these different functional areas break down into these lower level folders, and it's literally just that they're all empty folders. It's a way and a out of the box default structure that you can use to organize your project, tollgate, sprint, executive objectives, and so on. The second tree is that business process catalog. And so we talked about the 6 levels, but you'll actually notice that there are 2 level 4s in here. And this is important to understand when you use Mavim with the business process catalog. If you're only using the Excel and Azure DevOps version, you don't actually see the level 4 process activities. So that hierarchy, we've got those end-to-end processes, process areas, the level 3 processes, which are the distinct business processes. Remembering levels 1, 2, and 3 are product agnostic. Levels 4, 5, and 6 become product specific. The level 4 process activities are actually the steps in the diagrams that we produce and publish in that Mavim database. So when you look at those, there's actual steps with the start and end box, and then all the different tasks inside of that process flow diagram are called process activities. There's also this separate folder, and when Leo does the demo, he'll show this to you. We have scenarios, system processes, and test cases as well. So when you're on the level 3, you can choose to drill into those process activities and see the diagram, or you can choose to drill into the scenarios. The deliverables tree is broken down into some folders of functional areas. The functional areas basically have like 3 levels of folders. An example of that top level folder is like finance or operations. Then those break down further into like finance breaks down into like AP and AR. And so on. And then at that third level, AP breaks down further into like supplier management and, other functional areas. And then below every single one of our functional area folders that we've created in our structure, we have folders that store each of the different types of deliverables. And so we've got, I think, like 10 or 12 of these different types of deliverables that include the workflows, reports, integrations, configurations, enhancements, documentation, jobs, migrations, personalizations, which have actually been renamed to user interface in our latest release, security, environment, infrastructure, and requirements. The fourth tree is that success by design delivery plan. This is where most partners will extend and make lots of modifications, but it's a good starting point if you're a new partner and you're trying to come up with your own methodology. You can base it off of the success by design phases and create your own implementation methodology, but we break down the success by design delivery plan into our implementation phases like strategize, initialize, design, build, implement, and so on. And then below that, we break them down into functional areas. We have a plethora of workshops that exist in our Success by Design delivery plan, along with lots of tasks and documentations that all come from the implementation guidance and our checklists of things that every project should do, and the things that we define as like measures of success that we know lead to successful projects. So I want to spend a little bit more time talking about each one of these trees. And we're going to use an actual tree analogy to do that. So the first tree is that objectives tree. The analogy that we like to use here is the oak tree. Oak trees are strong, long-lived, and deeply rooted. And in the same way, objectives provide the stability that keeps your delivery aligned even as scope, timelines, and solutions evolve over time. When you use the business process catalog in Azure DevOps or Mavim, the objectives tree gives teams a structured way to define why the work matters that you're doing, not just what is being built. It helps you create those clear guardrails. There are 4 different types of objectives that we have created in our template. We don't provide you any objectives out of the box, just folders to store them in. And they are each kind of defined at, I'll call them different operating altitudes. So the first type is executive objectives. These tie the project to the broader transformation goals. Project objectives, which focus on improving specific functional areas. Program increment objectives, which align your delivery priorities over time. And then sprint objectives, which are those super short-term outcomes. You know, if we're focusing on getting invoicing working this week, you might have objectives that are specific to the work that needs to be done to be able to invoice a customer at the end of the week. And if we think about the business process catalog being the compass and the delivery plan is the choreography, the deliverables are our tangible outputs, and then the objectives are the anchor. So what I want to do now is switch gears, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the business process catalog tree. And the analogy that we like to use here is the redwood. And when we think about why the business process catalog tree exists, it's because it's answering the question of why in your project. It's why the project exists. So it's akin to that towering redwood because the redwood is a species that dominates the forest canopy and provides orientation for all the other trees. Redwoods are evergreen and enduring, so they last on and on and on, just like your business processes should. And much like the process taxonomy that underpins the organization, right? Like those processes should live on and on. We don't burn down the forest every time we want to make a change, or at least I hope we don't. This tree organizes those end-to-end processes into those logical levels, which we've already talked about, and they give you that clarity and consistency across your implementation. And when you look at this in either Azure DevOps or Mavim, it helps your teams understand the business operations before diving into specific configurations or customizations. And it gives you a structured hierarchy to be able to map the deliverables and your delivery plan too. And I think that redwood analogy helps emphasize the longevity and the guidance, just as its towering presence in the forest helps travelers navigate the forest. The third tree, which we've already talked about a little bit, is that delivery tree, or the deliverables tree, I should say, of the business process catalog. This tree represents the tangible outputs of a project. I like to think of it as the what must be produced to meet the client's needs. We chose the maple tree because it's known for two things. It has really broad leaves, and it also produces a sweet syrup, maple syrup. And I think the syrup is great because it symbolizes productivity and the value realization that we get out of deliverables. So it's one of the few trees in the forest that produces something that we as humans can actually consume and eat. And that's kind of what deliverables are all about in a project. And so this tree is cataloging all the artifacts that are required for successful implementations. There's configurations, the workflow, the data migrations, and so on. Each deliverable is linked to objectives and processes through what we call those functional areas. You might have noticed on our original map that those functional areas existed in a whole bunch of our trees. And the way they all get interconnected through the air quote fabric of the forest, the sunlight, whatever you want to refer to it as, are the functional areas and the area path field. And the area path field is designed specifically to work with Azure DevOps. You'll find that field persisted in Mavim as well. And that's what helps ensure traceability and alignment with those strategic goals. This is where you're going to define your acceptance criteria and your definitions of what's done and provide those quality gates to your project, while templates and automation strategies are set in place to help you accelerate your execution. So this tree is critical for maintaining scope clarity and preventing gaps between those business requirements and the technical outputs. And by visualizing and managing those deliverables effectively, teams can ensure that every sprint produces meaningful progress towards those desired outcomes. The last tree is the delivery plan. And the delivery plan, I said it earlier, it's the choreographer of the model. We use the aspen grove analogy very intentionally here because aspen trees share a common root system. You didn't know you were going to learn so much about trees today, did you? Even though each tree looks a little bit different above ground, those routes are shared. And that's exactly how the delivery plan should work. We might have lots of different work streams or individual trees working on your project, but the whole thing has to work together and stand up at the end. And the way we do that is that shared route system. Out of the box, our template includes a generic success by design aligned delivery plan. It gives every project a common baseline, standard phases, expected milestones, and a structure that aligns with Microsoft's implementation guidance. It's designed to be clear and lightweight so teams can get moving quickly, but it's one of the most important extension points for partners. It's not the first time I've said it today. I'll say it again. That delivery plan tree is meant to be extended. You might even completely replace it with your own as long as you're including all of the same elements in your replacement. This is where partners can bring your delivery methodology, your accelerators, your checkpoints, your IP, and still stay aligned to the broader process, the deliverables, and the objectives model that we've created for you. And that might mean that you need to add partner-specific phases or tailoring the workshops or creating custom workshops for the industries that you focus on, or align the plan to your internal operating rhythm. The key is that everything still connects back to the same shared structure of business processes, deliverables, and objectives. And that is what keeps those dependencies visible, your sequencing clear, and your teams can stay coordinated across the work streams. For solution architects, this matters because it lets you lead your delivery with intent. You get consistency of a Microsoft aligned framework with the flexibility to differentiate through your methodology. Think of it as a shared root system with room to grow your own branches and even your own trees. And with that foundation in place, we're going to move on, and I'm going to hand it over to Leo, who's actually going to open up Mavim and do a demonstration for us of the Microsoft Business Process Catalog in Mavim. Leo, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Rachel. So yes, let's now have a look at all that we've been talking about to you. What you now see on the screen is the actual Mavim platform. This specifically is the front end of the application, the Mavim portal. As I explained earlier, Mavim consists of a number of modules. And so for today's demonstration, we're going to focus on primarily exposing the information through the front end. And what you're seeing here is a representation of the business process catalog, the 15 end-to-end processes, completely in a new design provided by the Microsoft FastTrack team. I kind of like the ribbon approach. And we're going to have a look at some of the details that Rachel walked us through a moment ago on the slide with the structures. We're going to have a look at that. One more household item before I start clicking around. As I do, you'll notice that on any topic or item that I click on, there will be an additional panel opening up on the right-hand side containing the detailed information pertaining to that subject that we're discussing. It's how the portal in Mavim navigates. So with that, let's jump into it. Yes, the 15 end-to-end processes of the Y tree, as Rachel explained to us, and we can see here each end-to-end process depicted. And what the catalog offers, because it is that taxonomy, is the entire level breakdown of all the components from end-to-end process to process groups to the detailed processes to the system processes and so forth. And what you're seeing here is that visual representation of it from end-to-end process to that second level as we're seeing on the right-hand side. So if I go to prospect to quote, for instance, I can see within prospect to quote, the 6 or so process groups contain the range from managed customer relationships through estimating and quote sales all the way to sales analysis. And similarly, if I have a look at order to cash, I see that very same principle with my end-to-end processes and my level 2s. I can continue this exploration within the catalog itself because that ability to drill down is built within the taxonomy itself. And you saw me click on manage sales orders. And that brings us to that level 3. These are the sequence of processes that comprise the management of sales orders, starting with selling of the product subscriptions. And here's where we get to that level 3 that Rachel explained to us a moment ago. Remember, in her explanation, levels 1, 2, 3 are essentially system agnostic, and they're more functional in nature. We can see that clearly reflected here with those processes, with the process steps, and as well the roles that are executing those particular steps. These are the security roles as defined within the catalog. We'll see another example of that as well later in the demonstration. All of these are combined within the chart. As Rachel mentioned, the catalog itself consists of standard out-of-the-box around 700 processes, detailed level 3 processes describing the functioning of the application out of the box. Now, as you go through your different phases of implementation, as I explained on the prior slide as well, one of the key activities is understanding the fit to standard, and in those cases that there is a gap, the actual adaptation of these processes. And Mavim as a platform does offer those capabilities to leverage these out-of-the-box processes and customize those. And an example of that we can see on the next process over, the enter sales order, where these orange process activities reflect the actual extension of the out-of-the-box process, dependent on what the specific needs are of the organization. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit larger so we can see that additional steps, and in fact, even additional roles within the process to undertake these additional steps. And so with that, with Mavim, you have that ability to define all of those details that pertain specifically to how your organization works and executes these processes. That's one part of it, but as I mentioned as well in one of the slides, Mavim is that system of record, the central source of information, but we also have the ability to couple it to the other applications in the ecosystem, one of them being specifically, for instance, the Dynamics application itself. As you can see here for this particular process, the entering of the sales order, you have the ability to link that process description to the actual screen. And this can be done for multiple D365 instances as well, as you can see reflected here. And what that does, it couples those two items. In other words, the process definition from within the Mavim repository to, as you can see, we've navigated now to F&O, to the actual sales order screen as well, where I can see my list of my sales orders. And so this connection is one of the native connections that we provide with the Mavim platform. It's essentially bidirectional in nature as well. So we do offer the ability to navigate from the actual form in the modules of the Dynamics application through the use of the help function. And for those of you that are familiar with it, you'll notice that there's an addition tab with the processes here that allows us to understand all processes that are related to a particular form or screen and navigate back to it. And so there's that bidirectional ability to couple system with process. Now, allow me to navigate back on this process because I want to highlight one point that Rachel spoke of, and that is the fact that there are two level 4s in the visual representation. And as we saw, we were looking at the enter sales order process, right? We just discussed that. But for that same process, there are those level 4 scenarios as well, as these have been identified. And here's where we go from system agnostic to system specific. Each scenario pertaining as to how the entering of sales order and in what context can it be executed within a particular application. And so we can grab an example here. We can see from applications ranging from obviously Business Central to supply chain management. And if we look at the specific scenario of creating one of these sales orders manually in supply chain management, here's where we go to that specific L4. You're seeing a number of metadata fields here. I'll pause on that in a minute as well. But at this level, we have all of the information pertaining to the L4 with the description. But also from this point on, you're able to navigate within the catalog itself to the associated level 5s. Okay, so we're now down at the level of the system process itself, the actual creation, for instance, of those sales orders with the associated metadata. And again, I'll pause on what these are in a minute, but I want to provide you that full view of the hierarchy itself. And so we went now to the actual creation of the sales order and understanding within that what the L6s are, those test cases as they were referred to in the slide that we saw a moment ago from Rachel, with each one of these breaking down individually those activity steps themselves. We're actually looking now at the level of the application. And so, for instance, if I need to copy a sales order or I need to test that function, we are at that L6 with that test that I can go to, understand, and navigate directly to my application as well, where I see my copy from all of that particular item. So that one-to-one, that entire navigability of the hierarchy with all of the information in place. Let me go back to the sales order example that we will handle because I want to now pause on the metadata that you were seeing as I was scrolling around through the hierarchy. So aside from the processes and the process flows through those hierarchies, as we discussed a moment ago, Mavim also has the capability to capture all of the information pertaining to that particular process. And so those are the details that you're seeing on the right-hand side here that pertain to this particular process and its chart, ranging from its unique identifier, and these are elements that are utilized for the coupling, for instance, with the other tooling within, for instance, an implementation effort like Azure DevOps and such, to the unique identifier of the sequence of the process itself, where it sits in the hierarchy, its actual status, but also information pertaining to the process itself, its source, where it sits in what particular functional area. You can see here the exampling of the metadata that actually couples the process itself as well to the corresponding work items in Azure DevOps, and that navigability is there as well. This is one item I think that we'll focus on in one of the subsequent tech talks as well as enhanced information regarding the process itself with the extensive description, everything that is to be leveraged pertaining to the process during that, for instance, that design phase that I spoke of, as well as some of the other elements in the trees that Rachel just explained to us, including, for instance, those deliverables. In fact, you can see a number of them coupled here, but I'll navigate us now back to our central page and show you those items directly from the list as well. And you're seeing that representation here actually by functional area of the applications themselves. And so if I enlarge this so you can see this, we can look at, for instance, account payable. And we see here all those deliverables categories that we saw in Rachel's list as well. And so these are all of the items for this particular component that are going to have to be delivered as part of the implementation. We can look at, for instance, the configurations that are associated with accounts payable, and we can see the whole list of these represented here with all of the associated artifacts that go into that design and implementation work. Same thing, for instance, as we look at the workflows. As example here for the accounts payable function and module, we can see those reflected here and coupled, remember, at any given point in time to the associated processes that make use of these particular workflows. One item that Rachel did touch upon that I want to showcase is the fact that there is a enhancements deliverable category associated here, but it is an empty folder because that's obviously the fact that this is exactly what organizations do. They grab this standard out-of-the-box model and create their own extensions and enhancements. And so the catalog itself within Mavim provides the template, as you can see, to capture this information and house it and associate it with the processes. Going real quick back to the other elements within the catalog, we saw the processes, we saw the deliverables. I want to showcase as well the success by design as a delivery plan that is contained within Mavim as well. These are all the steps, and as recommended by Microsoft. Obviously, this is the part, as Rachel indicated, that every organization or implementation partner can customize or replace with their own methodologies and frameworks. But out of the box, the success by design methodology is there as well and can serve as a example to build off of. And lastly, I want to pause briefly on the objectives as well. As Rachel mentioned, there are placeholders directories in the catalog as well that allow for the capturing by phase, by grouping of the different objectives that are associated. With that, I want to show you one last item within the Mavim platform for this particular session. And this goes back to the statement that I made initially about Mavim being that central source, that central repository, combining all of this information. And because of the fact that it is so, we have both the processes information, but also the technical information available in, for instance, DevOps. We're able to combine that in the Mavim platform to provide this type of insight that allows us to understand at any given moment where the transformation stands and what the progress level is, from the scoping of it, what processes or what elements are in scope or out of scope, to which ones are original out-of-the-box elements compared to customized elements, and the type of fit gap that has been understood as part of the analysis. And that allows organizations to structure the entire approach to the implementation based on a process-driven approach, which we're seeing here from the scoping of it all the way down to the actual execution and the deliverables, of which we saw as well, categorized by area path, by type of deliverables, always associated to the processes, all the way down to, in the example of the chart that I showed, for instance, the security roles that are organizational roles as well, that you can drill down into. For instance, if I'm interested in understanding the impact of my implementation on, let's say, a maintenance manager, that association is always in there through those elements that I understand exactly what processes that this particular role executes within my organization are going to get impacted, and I can anticipate that, and it allows me to prepare not only from an application side, but from an execution side as well, that role for the execution post-implementation of the application to guarantee success. And so with that, this concludes the brief overview of the Mavim platform. We'll do more deep dives in the subsequent tech talks, but with this, I want to hand it back over to Rachel.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leo. So we're going to switch gears and kind of give you some resources and recommendations. We always like to wrap up a lot of our tech talks with like your links and some best practices. So we'll dive in and we'll wrap it up with some Q&A. So I'm not going to read all of these to you in great detail, but I think to recap what we've talked about today and kind of how do we use the information that we've talked about and apply that to your projects and have a process-focused solution approach. Remembering we always have to start the requirements and design workshops from those end-to-end business processes and areas. And we want to make sure that we're mapping the scenarios, those level 4s, to the configurations, the integrations, the extensions, the data migrations, and so on. Testing is obviously critical in every project, and we want to make sure that we're documenting and linking the testing back to those business processes, and that we're not just testing isolated features. We recommend that you use that catalog as your single source of truth and customize it, right? Make it be specific to your industry and your project scope, and your particular organization. If you've got different geographies and you need to like duplicate some nodes to make it support your unique company structure, tailor it to make it fit your organization and your structure without needing to rebuild something from scratch. And make sure that you're connecting everything, all of those delivery artifacts that you're doing, back to the business processes, and use it alongside our Success by Design checkpoints and our delivery plan to make sure that you're ready to go live and that you can have a successful implementation of Dynamics 365. We've pulled together a whole bunch of different links for you. If you want more information now, these are great resources that you can go access today. We hope that you'll join us for our upcoming Tech Talks in this series as well. If you want to see the past Tech Talks that we've already done, you can find those on the very first link here, as well as all of our guidance in the Guidance Hub. We've also pulled together a slide with lots of links for you to learn more about Mavim and the business process catalog inside of Mavim. These resources are already available for you today. The QR code that you do see on your screen will take you to the Microsoft Marketplace, and you can get the free trial of Mavim. We are planning to integrate Mavim into our implementation portal, and you'll be able to see those charts and visualizations. Much of what you saw in the demo today will be available in our implementation portal once we're integrated, and we'll have another Tech Talk on that topic in our series in the coming weeks and months. So definitely keep an eye out for that if you're interested. Like I said, we will be hosting more Tech Talks. We have created 2 AKA links, and I know there were some technical issues with the AKA links, but if you want to save these and put it on your calendar, they repeat every single Thursday at the same exact times, and you can use the same AKA link to join every week. aka.ms/BPE Tech Talks option 1 join or option 2 join will get you right into those meetings. Next week, we'll be introducing the Microsoft Business Process Catalog in Azure DevOps. So today we were focusing on the Mavim side. Next week, we'll be focusing on the Azure DevOps side. We hope that you'll join us for that. And as always, your feedback is very important to us. We hope that you'll please take a few moments to fill out our survey about today's Tech Talk. And if there's other Tech Talks you'd like to see in the future, please take a moment to fill out our survey. And with that, I think we're going to open it up for new questions. Mandy, I don't think we have any questions in the chat. We'll hang out online for another minute or two in case we do get any questions.